Today I'm doing a video that I've been really excited about doing, and that's my top 10 books of the decade. But I want to point out that my favourite books of the decade are just the books that I've read, not the books that have been published in this decade, because if that was the case, I'd probably struggle, because out of all the books that I've listed as my favourite of this decade, only one was actually published in this decade. Majority of these are classics, so no surprise. I want to start with a book that actually isn't the book that I think you think I would pick first. Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. For me, this is a novel that really is about York for me. I read it in York, it begins in York, and I fell in love with it. It's a massive book. It's a piece of kind of historical reimagining with magic. It's framed in kind of an 18th century narrative style, and you have footnotes and illustrations, and it is wickedly funny, imaginative, brilliantly written. Everything about it I love. It is a novel that I think I would have never have picked up if I hadn't have been in New York and they hadn't been doing the TV series. But it is one of those moments that makes me realise that, you know, I need to step out of my comfort zone. Even though this isn't really out of my comfort zone, because it is kind of historical. And now the novel I know you will have all guessed is going to be in this list. Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. On the surface, I could say it's about a middle-class woman who plans a party, and it's about the people she meets on her way in making preparations, and how meeting people and questioning things and walking around London make her challenge herself. But it has so much heart in this novel. Some people think Virginia Woolf's a very cold writer, and actually I really disagree with that. It is a novel I think everybody should read. I just don't know what else to say about it, except I urge you to go and read it. Now for the only book that has been published in this decade, and it is The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry. I was completely transfixed with this novel. I love historical fiction, and I think The Essex Serpent is one of the best. It's about friendship, love, morality, natural sciences, Darwinism, the silencing of women. It's about consumption. One of my favourite things in historical novels, genuinely. I've got an essay to write on consumption one day. When I've been going through the books that I wanted to pick for this video, I've also kind of been thinking what I think you would pick for me, because I think you all probably know me really well and know what I enjoy reading, and you know because you've really been on this journey with me. I started my channel in late 2012, so quite early on in this decade, I should say. And I think this one might surprise you, so we'll see. I would like to know if any of these choices did surprise you, because almost certainly me picking Mrs. Dalloway is not surprising at all. On Chesil Beach by Ian McEwan. It's about a couple who meet when they're kind of at university and come from very different backgrounds, but they fall in love and they decide to get married. The crux of the novel is all about their wedding night and kind of their failings, or how they perceive their failings. And what I love about Ian McEwan's writing, you know, in atonement and enjoying love, is the fact that he nearly always picks one event and makes the entire novel kind of spiral or unravel from that event, and through that kind of examines the psychologies of the characters, and it's about the choices in our life that we don't take and the what ifs, and it is heartbreaking. It physically hurts. Obviously, a Jane Austen novel has to be included in this list, and this decade I read my favourite Jane Austen novel, and it's Emma. Jane Austen is wickedly funny, and she often has a sense of humour that is wicked, but she just, every time, she always manages to write a novel that cheers you up, makes you think about things, you know, like money and status, but ties it all together in a beautiful love story. And Jane Austen is one of my favourite writers, and Emma will forever be, I think, my favourite. It's been a long time since I read Pride and Prejudice. I read Pride and Prejudice in the previous decade, and I do want to reread it, but Emma will always hold a very special place in my heart, mainly because I am Emma, a little bit. Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Wuthering Heights always captures my imagination because it's hella dark. Like, it is really dark and destructive and obsessive. I love its intensity, and I read it recently, actually. I read it again last year, and I was completely struck by how amazing this novel is, and you know, how you kind of really pick up on the characterization a lot more than I did. I think I viewed this story very differently as well. I think when I first read it, I definitely viewed it as a love story, and I read it very differently now as an adult. And for me, that's a sign of a good novel. I mean, the majority of these books on this list I have reread, and they've grown with me, and they've brought new things, and they've challenged me in different ways. And that's what I want from a novel. A bit like I said that I'm Emma, from Emma, I always tend to feel like, or resonate with, the characters that are often the most hated in literature. Not that Emma is hated, but Jane Austen said, you know, that she'd made a character that no one would really like. And I really resonate with Cathy, and a lot of my own flaws in my personality, Cathy also has. Wrapped up in this novel is also my love of Yorkshire. My love of that countryside and of that county. And I remember when we went to the Yorkshire Moors, and I just decided to pick up my stuff with this novel, and I just walked on the moors by myself. And then it started to rain, and I was like, oh my god, I'm in the novel. A lot of these novels have a really strong sense of setting. Actually, I think, you know, pretty much all of them, and that's something that I really love. I've always loved setting in novels and landscape, and looking at how that forms them to make a character itself, and Wuthering Heights and the Yorkshire Moors are a character in this novel. Howard's End by E.M. Forster. Howard's End is a political novel in quite a lot of ways. It's about social class and wealth, and it's about connecting with people. Kind of the thing that Ian Forster always loved or always championed was only connect. The idea that, you know, we're here on this world to connect with other people. And the failings of some of the characters in this novel is their failings at not connecting. It is actually, I think, a really relevant book to read right now. I think men who have a lot of wealth and privilege using women. Forster's characterization of the Schlegel sisters is like, they're my favourite family. I think they're my favourite literary family. I feel like I'm repeating all of my words, so I'm just going to end with, it's brilliant. Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. I think that Lolita is one of the best books ever written. The way it creates its narrative, and kind of Nabokov creates Humbert's own version of history, I think is like genius. The narrative is framed around, you know, Humbert's trial, and it's a document of him like testifying and putting his version of events across. The reader knows that this is completely false, but the way Nabokov writes makes Humbert charming. Why I find it so interesting is that Nabokov is kind of writing at a beginning of a time in literature where people are really starting to deconstruct the meta-narratives, you know, these big monoliths about what stuff is. And instead of kind of breaking down accepted histories, when Nabokov, through the character of Humbert is creating a new history, and he's creating one truth. And I understand why it's controversial, and I'm not saying that the actions of this character make this book, because they do not, but the way he frames it really challenged my idea of what a book could be and what a book could do. I should have really done this one with Mrs. Dalloway. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe it's good that I broke up The Wolf. To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. This is one of my favourite Woolf novels. I'm a huge Woolf fan, already discussed that. love her. Virginia Woolf has great heart to her writing, but there's also like a stillness and a calmness, and so you're kind of reading, you know, slowly, and then you have to like suddenly stop because you realise, like, shit, that's really good writing, or it just suddenly hits you and you don't realise how impactful a sentence is or a bit of the narrative. Virginia Woolf does that every single page. She's an incredible writer, and I think in looking at kind of the future of women, the changing roles of women, artistry and women, To the Lighthouse is the book to go for. The last book is Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. I read this book during my MA at university, and I'd always wanted to read it because I'm fascinated by books about women who have affairs, especially in Victorian novels, because they nearly always die, and I'm fascinated by that problematic plot device, I guess. Gustave Flaubert is a beautiful writer. I've only ever read Madame Bovary, but he's a beautiful writer, and the way he writes Emma is also beautiful. It's also weirdly like, I'm pretty certain I heard somewhere that like there was a quote from him, this could be completely wrong, where he was like, he just was turned on by Emma the entire time he was writing this novel. But apart from slight creepy writer, it is a beautifully written novel. The characterization is perfect. I think it's just one of those great novels that I read and instantly thought it's going to be a favourite. This novel is ultimately about, you know, how our kind of romantic ideals destroy love. Deep down, romanticism kills love, and it, you know, the expectations that we create can be really damaging and destructive, and ultimately Madame Bovary dies because of romanticism. Happy novel. I'm done for the decade. I think it's very unlikely that I'll find any books that I love as much as these. The end of this decade feels quite monumental because you know, I was 14, you know, when we kind of started, and my life as a 24-year-old is so different. It's completely different, obviously, because I'm an adult now, whereas I was a child before. But I'm in a completely different place than I thought I'd be, and I'm very happy. And it's interesting how life works out, especially because these are the books that kind of helped me on my way, and they were the stepping stones really for getting me to where I am. So these are my top 10 books of the decade, and ultimately the books that made me.